It's not something you just pluck off a tree. There isn't like a bread tree where you just like little Olive Garden breadsticks just come out of the ground and like, ooh, delicious. You have to make it. You have to prepare it. It's an artificial food, not meaning it's fake. It's just meaning that it doesn't just come out of the ground. So bread was the first food that we know of that it takes preparation in order to make it. And a lot of research that people have done in human history has been that it was around Egypt, that Egypt seems to be the first country, the first area of the world that was actually making bread. Could be possibly where the Israelites had learned to make bread there. And the Bible actually talks about bread quite a bit. When the Israelites are in the desert, and they're starving to death, they're hungry, they've left Egypt. They're even saying, at least when we were in slavery, at least we had bread to eat. At least we had something to eat every day. And out here we have nothing. You've brought us out here to die, God. And what God sent from heaven was manna. It's kind of like a bread pancake. All right, so he sent manna from heaven. And I think it's important that he sent manna. It shows that it wasn't a natural occurring substance. You know, it wasn't like raining Skittles from the sky and saying like, oh, look, nature Skittles. Like, it's clearly when they saw this bread that it wasn't a natural substance. He didn't provide them apples. He didn't provide them berries. He provided them manna to remind them that God is the one that has prepared this bread, that he is making this bread, that this is artificial. Now, again, not meaning fake, just it took preparation. And God sent the bread. All right, and then further on when Jesus is teaching people to pray, he says, pray this way. God, please give me this day my daily bread. It had become an expression. Bread was a staple, and is still that way in many societies. That bread is a staple food, meaning it's that thing that helps just fill you. There's places that have rice as a staple food, beans as whatever it might be. This is the foods that help to make sure the meal is filling, and it's in plenty of abundance, and it's inexpensive that anybody can afford bread. And at least even the very, very poor can afford bread. And so bread became that symbol of, hey, listen, pray for your needs. When you have needs, pray that God provides you what you need to survive each day, providing that daily bread that you pray for again the next day, and you pray for again the next day. But in that, there's also this expression in Scripture of the breaking of bread, that the gathering together and the breaking of bread is where memories are formed. It's the breaking of bread that you get to laugh around the table and enjoy one another, and you invite friends over and you break bread together. All right, and it's this gathering time. It's this enjoyment time. I was helping a friend of mine do an engagement. All right, and so he was getting engaged to his girlfriend, and he had a very elaborate setup. He wanted to take her to all their like major life event spots. So he wanted to make sure the very first date they went on, he wanted to recreate that, and he wanted to recreate like where they had their first kiss, and where they went off, all these kinds of things. And it was going to end at the beach where he had written like, will you marry me in the sand? Real original. And so we were talking about all the friend group together or gather. If that's what you guys did, they invented it. All right, if your husband did that, they invented that one. So we, I'm listening to this. All the friends were helping plan it and kind of how we're going to make this work. And he wanted it to be kind of like a scavenger hunt. And so again, the place of his first date was Olive Garden. He wanted her to go there and have Olive Garden breadsticks. So I immediately volunteered for that station. And so I'm like, I'll take Olive Garden. I feel like I can organize this piece the best. And so what he wanted, basically, I'd be sitting there. It says, get there early so you can be like a table right by the door. So when you see her walk in, you wave her over. Because each place she's going, she thinks she's going to find him. And instead, found me. All right, but I had a clue that would get her to the next spot and the next spot. So I'm supposed to have a piping hot thing of bread. All right, Olive Garden breadsticks right there. They're delicious. They're amazing. And I'm supposed to have that, give her a breadstick, and then give her the clue. I wanted to write the clue on the breadstick. He thought that was, like, dangerous. Like magic marker on a breadstick doesn't sound healthy. I don't know. I thought it was a great idea. I get to Olive Garden, and they are out of breadsticks. I'm like, I need to see a manager immediately. All right? And I tried to explain to them, like, this is for an engagement. You cannot mess this up. How do you not have bread? How do you not have bread on this day? And he's like, I'm sorry. And he says, listen, I know you have to say that because there's not enough bread. I need a piece of bread, okay? I need 2 pieces of bread, one for her, one for me. So he's like, I promise you, I'm all out of bread. And I'm calling him freaking out like, oh man, this is ruined. We've ruined it. And he's like, I said, what else should I get? What should I get? He's like, I don't know. And I said, okay, let me get some bruschetta or something and at least pretend that there's some kind of bread to eat here. All right, a little hard, crispy bread. All right, it doesn't count. It's not like Olive Garden breadsticks. All right, but in this moment, there was a memory tied to Olive Garden breadsticks. There was this memory tied to this first date that led to a point that now they're married with multiple kids. That's where breadsticks will get you. So in that, what we see even here today, there is still that element that yes, bread is the staple, that it's this, we can use this expression of our daily bread, but it's also this activity that is used to gather us together. That I always say the same thing every day. I always love to go out to eat with people. I tell them I eat every day. I'd rather eat with you than not with you. All right? And so it's one of these things that gathers us together. And today, we're going to look at the story of the feeding of the 5,000. Now, specifically in this story, it actually says that there were 5,000 men who were there, which quite possibly mean, if you count up the women and children, there could be 12,000 people there. We don't really know. There's a lot of people. It is a huge, huge crowd. All right, and we're going to start in John chapter 6 and verse 5. John 6 and verse 5, and we'll eventually be reading down through verse 14. All right, it says here, therefore Jesus, lifting his eyes and seeing that a large crowd was coming to him, said to Philip, where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat? This he was saying to test him, for he himself knew what he was intending to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, for everyone to even just receive a little bit. And one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, well, there's a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are these for so many people? Verse 10, Jesus said, have the people sit down. Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in numbers of about 5,000. Jesus then took the loaves, and having given thanks, he distributed to those who were seated. Likewise also of the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were filled up, he said to his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments so that nothing will be lost. And so they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Therefore, when the people saw this sign, which he had performed, they said, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. All right, so as we've been breaking it down each week, let's ask ourselves, we've been asking ourselves, what does this say about people? What does this say about Jesus? What I am statement does this fulfill? And then ultimately, what does this sign say to me? So what does this say about people? There's a couple people we specifically see in the story. The first is Philip. And Philip, all throughout the Gospels, always seems to deliver like the most ignorant questions. Sorry, Philip. The most like, oh man, poor Philip never seems to get it. I'm always like, oh, poor Philip. All right, he gets a good redeeming story in Acts to kind of conclude his story arc. All right, but he's got to learn at some point here that Jesus never has questions he doesn't know the answer to. So when he's asking a question, he knows the answer. And he wants to test you to see, do you understand who I am yet? when Jesus asks, man, where are we to buy bread so that all these people may eat? Philip has some options here. He can say something to the degree of, listen, you're Jesus. You can do whatever you want. You could have manna fall down from heaven. You could have Olive Garden breadsticks pop up from the ground. All right, you could magically fill their bellies. All right, you can do anything because of who you are. And he would have said, Philip, you got it, man. You finally are beginning to understand. I think whatever Philip had said, all right, that would display God's glory, I think Jesus would have been like, all right, let's do it. Perfect. All right, I'm gonna fill their bellies. I'm gonna grow a bread tree right here in front of them. Whatever he would have said, I think Jesus would have done. All right, but in this moment, Philip just is thinking very humanistically. He's just like, man, we do not have enough money. We do not have enough money to take care of all these people. I mean, 200 denarii, that's about $2,000 is basically what he's saying. $2,000 isn't enough to feed all these people. They wouldn't even be able to get a little cracker, cheese and cracker on that. All right, there's just too many people here. We can't afford this. All right, and he's like, yeah, you're right, we can't afford this. So at least Andrew then has a little bit better understanding. At least he looks at things a little differently. And maybe he's just a different kind of person. I think I see myself in this sometimes. Maybe you see yourself in this. He immediately begins to look around. All right, and he looks and identifies, hey, all we have at this moment, all we have is I got this kid, and he's got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Now, I fully realize that this is not enough to feed all these people. However, it's all we got. It's all we got, and I want to present that before you now, Jesus. All right, and I do think, I don't think that's a bad way of looking at things. I don't think that's a bad way of seeing it. I think it's probably how a lot of you operate. You have a certain amount of capability. You have a certain amount of things you're used to taking care of problems. If you work at a job, you constantly are given problems that you then have to solve. All right, and the bigger problems you solve, the more capability you think you have to solve bigger problems. All right, and I think a lot of times we look at our life and say, all right, here's a problem I can handle, I'm just going to handle it. If there were 8 people there, all right, Andrew would have been like, here, look, we got some bread. I can take care of this. Here, everybody gets a piece, everyone gets a little piece. All right, and look, we're all full. But he clearly sees, he doesn't think that this is enough bread to fill everybody. He's just bringing Jesus what he has. And I think there is times for us to fully understand the miracle, it's important to recognize how little there was to start with. And I think in our life, we have to at times recognize where our capability ends so that we can clearly see, here's my ledge. Here's everything I'm capable of, Lord, and I praise you for what you made me capable of. All right, I'm not missing you in the center of this. However, I'm clearly at the edge of what I'm capable of, and I'm asking you now, I'm praying to you, will you take care of the rest? Will you do this? I will not mistake who it is that has solved this problem. And I think it's important to do that. I think we should look at when we hit the end. And I think we see it a lot when we're dealing with like sickness of a family member. You've done everything you do. We've brought them to the doctor. I brought them to the best experts. And now all I can do is pray. I think we've seen that, maybe experienced that financially, that there are more bills than there are dollars. And we start just praying, Lord, I need your provision here. What we did is we identified the end of ourself, and then we clearly saw, God, whatever happens after this, I'm going to know is you. And I think sometimes God wants us to recognize it so we don't miss. So we don't miss that it is God moving and God working and God doing a miracle here. So Philip brings him what he's got. All right, and this is then the instance in which Jesus now says, okay, this is what I'm going to use. I'm going to use what little you have, and I'm going to show you that when you give this to me, when you hand this to me and say, let me do with it as I please, what Jesus then does is take these 5 loaves, pass it around, everybody gets just enough. Everybody fills enough. But that's not the end. That would be a miracle in itself. Everyone like, ooh and ah. They can clearly see there's a kid with a couple loaves of bread up there, and yet everybody seems to get some. Amazing. But that's not the end. That's not the end of what Jesus is trying to explain. He then tells his disciples, I want you to go and gather up all the little leftover crumbs. All right? When I eat, I always can tell where I eat at. I am a very messy eater. And for whatever reason, my area is covered in crumbs. And I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't know what I'm doing while I'm eating that makes my area covered in crumbs. Maybe I'm just eating 10 times the amount of bread as the normal person, and therefore there's just more crumb potential. All right, but man, I'm always so messy. So he says, hey, let's not be wasteful, right? Let's be responsible. Let's go and pick up all the crumbs. All right, and where the 12 baskets come from is because there are 12 disciples. He sends out each disciple, and they each fill a basket. Now everybody's amazed. The crowd sees what has happened. Not only did he multiply the bread to feed everybody, but the multiplying wouldn't stop. All right, it was, multiplied too much. Collects it all and has more bread at the end than when he started. Again, that's the miracle. All right, that's the miracle, but I always want to look deeper. I always want to look and say, you know what, I think we're dealing with an iceberg here. All right, I think we're dealing with something. If it's a sign, it's not just the outward miracle. That's what we can see in the iceberg. That's what's sticking above the water. That's the miracle that we can see. There was a little bit of bread, now there's a lot of bread. Miracle. But there's a sign here. It's explaining something deeper about Jesus. He took these 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, all right, and this multiplication began to happen. I think bread was an important element to this. He is linking himself to the provider of manna in the Old Testament. He is linking himself to the one that provided manna to the people of Israel, and it multiplied every morning. They'd come out, and there was more manna. They'd eat it all. They'd take it throughout the day. They'd eat it. Next morning, more manna. And so he's reminding them of the one who originally gave them manna. But again, I think it's so important that when the disciples went out, they each returned with their basket. I have a feeling that Andrew, the one that had brought the basket from the boy, he kind of felt the weight of the basket as he handed it to Jesus. When he goes and picks up all the little pieces of bread, and he's holding his basket, walking it back to Jesus, he's like, this feels like the same weight. This feels like exactly what I handed him to begin with. And as he gets to the front, he sees all of the other 11 disciples, all 12 of them now, each have a basket full. What Jesus is revealing is that I am the provider. I am the one who fills you. He does it physically first. You were hungry, I physically filled your bellies. I physically filled you up. You're no longer hungry. I also look at what you have left over. You have a full basket left over. You are full basket, because he doesn't want to waste anything. He says, hey, we might need to have other hungry people later. Now they got all these baskets to feed other people. And he says, look, I'm giving you more than you even needed. I'm filling you up. If you believe me in what I've done physically, all right, I've taken all this bread, and now each one of you is full. All right, and now you each have a full basket. He is showing something far deeper. The way C.S. Lewis put it, and he says it's easy to think of God as this distant being that could care less for his creation, and even if he does care, look at how many people might be praying at any given moment, all around the world, day and night. All right, how do you begin to divide up all that time? You know, there was the movie that came out years ago, Bruce Almighty. We'll call it Light Heresy. All right? And the powers of God were given to a human. Now, the one thing it does, that it tries to express in the movie, is he's got all these prayers and all these people to answer, and his time, how does he, in all this time, he's trying to type it out, he's trying to answer all these prayer requests, how do you do this? And from a human point of view, it seems impossible, because we deal with this on a micro scale all the time. You have a job, and you have a family, and you have responsibilities around the home, chores, things to do around the house. You got church calling on you to do things. There's this Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or soccer or volleyball. There's always something pulling time, and there's constantly these moments that there's not enough time in the day. I don't have time to do everything I need to do. How do I get everything done in a 12, 16-hour day? And that's when we start pulling 18-hour days or 20-hour days. All right? Then we just start convincing ourselves to do all-nighters. All right? And we look at our time in this mindset that like, yeah, I got to divide it all up. And that's what we then put on God. And we start thinking, yeah, listen, why does God care about my little individual problem? Why would God care about what I'm dealing with? He's got bigger things to deal with. He's got famines and he's got wars. All right, he's got people with serious problems. And I'm over here busy because of soccer. All right, I'm over here busy at work. Like, I'm over here dealing with a little problem. I don't want to bring this before God. I don't want to waste his time. It's a misunderstanding of God, because God does not divide his time. God does not divide his energy. God does not divide his attention. As C.S. Lewis was saying, we have this picture of God that he's a million billion miles away. Why would he care about this little golf ball, this little marble that's us? But the truth is, what really is going on, he is infinite. He is everywhere. He is eternal. And what that means is when we start thinking of his eternality, that he can spend all of his eternity with us every moment of our life. Here in this moment, God can spend his entire eternity focused on me. Now, this isn't a me-centered thing. This is going to be a God-centered thing. Because when we start understanding that God can spend his eternity with me in that moment and you in this moment, he can spend all of his eternity. When you start saying he doesn't divide his time, it only multiplies. The more believers there are, he has more than enough time, all right, to be able to do it. He has all eternity. He has all eternity, and he can use that eternity focused on whatever issue you're dealing with in the moment. And when we go through life and we keep saying, you know what, I want to carry the weight of the universe on my shoulders, when there's God standing there and saying, you could put that on my pinky, all right? And I have enough room on my pinky for all people's problems for all time, all right? We are carrying the weight of our universe, and we don't have to. We do not have to. Jesus is here he's explaining, he's trying to visually show what, if you think that this is a limited amount of bread that needs to be divided into little tiny pieces like this, you're wrong. You take enough that will fill you, okay? Take enough that will fill you. And then when you look at what you have left over, you're going to see you have more than enough to share with others. Each disciple could see, not only was he full, his basket is full. He can spend an eternity with us every moment of every day. All right, and this leads right into it's right in the same passage, so it's not even hard to guess. I wonder what I am statement this reveals. All right, it's there in the very passage in John chapter 6. It is saying that he is the bread of life. He's speaking to them, and he says, Jesus said to them, listen, understand, I am the bread of life. I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. Whoever believes in me shall never thirst. When I think about Jesus describing himself as bread, it kind of gives me this idea of an intimate connection. One of the things that we should be recognizing the symbol of in communion, what we are doing is we're literally saying, I'm eating this, I'm ingesting this, I want this in me and with me. And that's what Jesus is relating himself as. He says, listen, I am your bread. I want you in me. You should want me in you and with you, all right, so that I can fill you. On my list of things, all right, there's a distance. There are some things I don't even want to be near. When Roman's little diaper genie thing is full, I don't even want to be in the room with it. When I walk in the room, it's like, oh my gosh, okay, that's gross. I can't do that. When it can get past this smell, I can't hardly smell anything, but I can taste things. The smell gets so bad, there's enough smell molecules in the air that a normal person would be able to smell. I can't ever smell things, and I'm like, oh, I can taste it. It's gross. All right, I don't even want to be in there. I got to take it out. I got to walk it out. I put it out in the garage, and it's one of those things that even when it's garage, I just push out. I know it's not going to, my trash isn't going to be picked up till Thursday. No problem. I'm putting it out by the streets. All right, I'm getting it out there. The raccoons can eat it. There are some things you don't even want to be near. Now, there's other things that, yeah, I could be near, but they're so gross I don't want to touch them. Dishes. I don't want to touch dirty dishes. It's the food that's on the dirty dishes. I don't want to touch it. Like, I try to touch it in a way like, oh, look, there's a clean spot. Okay, I can get that in the dishwasher. Perfect. So there are things I can't even be around. There's things I can't touch. All right, but even on a list of things that, maybe I'm willing to touch it, but I'm not going to eat it. All right, so there might be something that I'm like, oh, there's a little wrapper, that's gross, it's old. I constantly find things behind a couch or in the couch cushion. I'm like, oh, that's gross. All right, but I'll touch it, no big deal. I'm not going to eat it. That's gross. When it comes to Jesus, I think there's obviously a lot of people that they put a distance between themselves and Jesus. They put a distance. They do not want Jesus in their life. I don't think that applies to any of you. You definitely came to a really weird place if you were like, I don't want to talk about Jesus. I don't want to think about Jesus. You probably wouldn't go to church if you were that way. So I'm assuming none of you are in that category. However, that kind of next level up, there's a lot of people that are going to say, you know what, I'm willing to be near him. And the reason why I want to be near Jesus is I can clearly see, you've given me story after story after story, Joe, of the amazing things that he can do. That he can do some incredible things. And there are people that want to be near Jesus for the miraculous. There has to be people in this crowd, and because obviously this is not one of the first miracles that Jesus did. He has done quite a few miracles up to this point, enough that a huge crowd, Jesus is in town, what's going to happen next? I can't wait to find out what he does. I know there's people in that 5,000 crowd that they don't necessarily intimately want Jesus in their life. They want to be near him. They want to see what he does next. And there's a lot of people today that they like Jesus near them. They like him near them. Some don't quite want to touch him, all right? And some are willing to touch him. They just don't quite. Right when you eat something, right when you want something in you and with you, that's permanent. That's with you now. But they want him close enough that if they need something, they can get it. If they need a miracle, when it's really bad, they like to know where Jesus is at. They like to. I feel like Roman hides food around the house so that when he's sitting in the couch, he's like, you know what, I'm hungry, don't want to get up. I look at things, I'm like, what is that he is eating? I don't know. And he's really gnawing at it. I'm like, that's so old, Roman, don't eat that. All right? But I think he's hiding things from him. So there's people that they like Jesus near them, nearby, so that they can ask for things when they need it, so that they can get things when it's really bad, when things are really falling apart. Yeah, they might reach out to Jesus in that moment. All right, that's the difference here when he says, listen, I want you to think of me as the bread of life. Now, if you are willing, and you're not just willing to be near me, and you're not just willing to touch me, but you're willing to say, I'm going to treat you like the bread of life. I want you in me and with me. You will never hunger again. You will never thirst again. All right? He's talking that he fully satisfies. He fully satisfies. And I think, again, I was using this example at Trinity, so sorry you have to hear the same example over again. When it comes to satisfaction, there's two criteria for me. A, it has to taste good. B, it has to be big enough. Okay? So that's what I've been struggling with. I know the doctor has told me, he showed me numbers that are on a chart that say I'm whatever. I need to lose weight is what he's basically saying. And I need to get healthier. And so I need to go on some sort of diet. The problem with diets, I either have to eat food that is gross, all right, and that it tastes like bark, all right, and it might look good and smell good, and it tastes like something I would give my hamster, all right? And I just can't take diet. My mom does this to me all the time. She'll or she'll put it in the food, and as I'm eating, I'm like, why does this, you're trying to be nice. Well, I shouldn't say this. I'm not always trying to be nice to my mom. But I'll say something like, this pasta tastes funny. She's like, how did you know? Like, what do you mean? She's like, it's like whole wheat. I'm like, I know. I can tell. It tastes healthier. All right? She'll hand me a dessert. All right? And she's like, Joe, I want you to have an open mind. I'm like, oh, no. I don't want an open mind. All right? She says, I want you to have an open mind. All right? This tastes just like a fudgesicle. This tastes just like a fudgesicle. I'm like, Mom, it's not going to taste like a fudgesicle. I've eaten fudgesicles. I know what fudgesicles taste like. You haven't had a fudgesicle since the 80s, okay? I know what a fudgesicle tastes like. And I taste it. I'm like, Mom, it's like sand. It's gritty. Why? Fudgesicle shouldn't be gritty, all right? There's a grit to this. She's like, it tastes so good. I'm like, Mom, it doesn't. If I were to give you a real dessert with real sugar, an appropriate amount of sugar for a dessert, you would know that this doesn't taste good. All right, so there's a taste element and a size element. Like, then there's a diet to say you can eat whatever you want. All right, you just can have this much of it. It's like it's a little petit-four steak. All right, like I get a little steak and a little potato and a little piece of broccoli. I'm like, excellent. Next. Like, I can't do that. I need a full meal. I need a man-sized meal. All right, and so that's the two pieces of my criteria of what is going to satisfy me. Even Scripture comes out and says in Psalms, he says, come and taste and eat of me and see that I am good. I know if this is new to you, you're like, I don't know what you mean by like saying that I want like Jesus like in me and with me. Like when you start saying, I want Jesus to be the center of everything in my life. I want the reason why I go to work, the reason why I come home and serve my family, the reason why we go to soccer and volleyball and Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever else it is you have to do throughout the week, the reason why I do this stuff, that Christ is in the center. I want to honor and glorify Jesus in everything I do. I want more opportunities to share Jesus with more people in my life, that he becomes the center, the reason for everything we do. And then some things just begin to fall away because you say like, yeah, just Jesus just isn't in the center of it. Not that it was bad or evil. It's just I need more time to focus on what Christ wants me to do for him and his kingdom and for his glory. And when Jesus is that kind of center of your life, I'm going to tell you it is good. It is good. I was 16 years old at a campfire and God started convicting me on, Joe, listen, you've believed, like again, this isn't some kind of audible voice, it's just kind of this overall, it was an over-encompassing, it was more than just like kind of that feeling in the pit of your stomach, it was like the feeling in the pit of your stomach with like all the little goosebumps everywhere, and I just kind of knew in this moment, I've been aware of God and not running away from him in any way, shape, or form. I was a good kid and a good Christian, but I knew I wasn't at a point where I would say, God, I'll go wherever you want me to go. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And when I was like, that's the next piece. That's the last piece for me to say, yep, I'll do whatever, God. No restrictions. Not I'll do this except blank, blank, blank. I'll go there except for blank, blank, blank. I had no exceptions. And I took my little stick and I threw it in the fire and I meant it. And there was really a change in my life. And all I could do is tell you, it's been nothing but exciting. There's obviously hard times and good times like everybody else in life. But there's never been a moment where I said my life hasn't been incredibly interesting and exciting and amazing, and the people he's had me meet and the places he's had me go. It's been incredible when I've said, yes, I tasted of the Lord, and I'm telling you it's good. If you come to some new food, when Matt and I were in Haiti, there were all sorts of new foods that I needed Matt to taste first. All right? The meats I'm never afraid of. You give me a cooked meat, I don't care what it is. That's dog, don't care, it's delicious. If it's meat and it's cooked, no problem. Vegetables, soups, I'm a little more wary on. When he come back like, this is so good. I'm like, you do like healthy things, like you like kale. All right, like you saying this is good like kale? Or are you saying it's really like, Joe, you'll like it? I'm like, okay. And in the dessert section especially, the last thing I ever want is to have like a fruity dessert. That's like the worst case scenario is dessert. I've been eating healthy for the whole meal. At the end of the meal, I don't want something with nuts or fruit, all right, or vegetables based. I want something that is sugary. And so he would eat, so like, oh, Joe, I don't know what this is, but it's incredible. I'm like, ooh, thank you. And so I would then get to eat it. So often you have to take the testimony of other people and say, yes, when you follow Christ, it is incredibly worth it. When you start looking at him like your bread of life, when you look at him like that and you start consuming him like that and saying, God, I want you in me and with me everywhere I go. I want you to be what sustains me. I want you to be what it is that makes my life possible, that fulfills me. Using the idea of bread is saying, like, yes, this is what I need for my spiritual life. If there are things other than Jesus that are, this is what refreshes me spiritually, I'm going to say, like, I don't think that's refreshing you spiritually, because Jesus is the bread of life. He's the one that makes sure you never have to hunger again. He's the one that makes sure you never have to thirst again. And if you're getting some sort of spiritual rejuvenation from something other than Jesus, you're not being spiritually renewed. You're not. You might be getting refreshed in some other kind of physical sense. You spiritually are dying. All right? And there is a point in when you are, when you start feeling really thirsty, like if you're really thirsty, they say, like, you're already dehydrated if you feel really thirsty. And you need to drink water, get some electrolytes in there. But there is a point when you, after you've been thirsty for so long, you stop being thirsty. All right? That is your body literally shutting that down. It just assumes you're not able to get water, might as well not make you miserable as you then die. All right? But if you really try to say, I'm not going to drink anything, you wouldn't be crazy thirsty for all 2 or 3 days. After about a day and a half, you'd stop being thirsty. It's not because you're not thirsty anymore. It's you're dying and your body's like, you might as well die peacefully. Let's die like as you go to close your eyes. You just get real tired and you go to sleep and die. All right? And that's what could be happening to you spiritually. Like, yeah, I haven't really been desiring Jesus. I feel like I'm doing okay. I'm going through my life. It's just really busy, and I don't really think about Jesus at all. You are dying. You are dying spiritually, and you don't realize it. He is the bread of life. When you come to him, you are not going to be thirsty anymore. When you come to him, you're not going to be hungry anymore. So when we start thinking about what this says about me, the first kind of piece of that is, let's not just want what Jesus has to offer us. So often we get very focused on, like, yes, like, I want Jesus in my life because, I'm sick, or I have a loved one sick, I want that healing, or I want Jesus in my life because he kind of just brings me a peace or a joy or whatever it might be. And we want what Jesus provides, and we've lost sight of just who he is, that we should want Jesus in our life, that we should want Jesus, that should be our overarching, just total desire is, I want Jesus. And if Jesus were to offer me nothing else, if Jesus comes and says, here, you have eternal life and I'm going to give you nothing else. You got an eternity for all this incredible stuff, and here on earth you get nothing else. Would we still say we want Jesus? And the answer is we should. We should say, man, Jesus, you've given me far more than I could ever want or ever deserve. I want you. I want more of you. I want to know you more, and I want to know you more intimately. I hope we can begin to see Jesus as that bread of life, in which we are not hungry or thirsty anymore. I hope we can look at other people when we see the way that they live their lives, what they're doing, that they're thirsty, they're hungry, they are searching after things in this world that will never satisfy them. It's like you take someone that's really thirsty, and if they're like drinking a soda, like a root beer, and you're like, man, that's not going to quench your thirst. If you are really thirsty, you need to drink water. You need to drink something with like electrolytes. Go drink a Pedialyte or something. All right? When you are really thirsty, to see people doing things that you're like, yeah, that's not going to quench your thirst. That's not going to quench your hunger. We have the answer. Say, I want you to try something new. I want you to begin to look at Jesus. I know he might be new to you. I want you to look at Jesus. I want you to read about Jesus. I want to share with you some stories about Jesus, that he is the bread of life. And that when you really come to him and you consume him, you're never going to be hungry again. You're never going to be thirsty again. He is that multiplying element. All right, when we take a bite of food now, the problem is that little food gets digested, moves out, and then we're hungry again. And when it comes to Jesus, he says like, man, you really come after me? You really come and know me, eat of me? You're never hungry or thirsty again. I completely fill you. I'm still multiplying. I'm growing and growing and growing. The more we learn about Jesus, the more we want. All right, the larger our stomach grows, he then fills that space. The more our desires go and our dreams grow, the more he begins to change the things that we want and desire in life. He is growing and filling that spot. Not because he really got bigger or smaller. It's just in our life we can experience. We experience what fills us, what satisfies us. And everything in our life can be satisfied by Jesus Christ in our life. I know it feels like that Jesus is the kind of the spiritual part of my life. That Jesus is this religious element of my life. I like being connected to something kind of bigger, and it's a small little piece to my life. Jesus doesn't want to be a piece of your life. He doesn't want to be a part of your life. And even though I use the term, and you're going to be like, Joe, that's exactly what you said. Jesus doesn't even want to just be the center of your life. He wants to be the entirety of your life. He wants to be you. My dad always said to me as I'm eating junk food, Joe, you are what you eat. So like, okay, I am a fudge round then. Like, you are what you eat. My dad would say that to me all the time. You are what you eat. You are what you eat. Yeah, sure, I'll buy it. All right, and eventually, and I guess there is a scientific thing, whatever you're eating is what the molecules are that's reproducing your cells. It kind of is some truth in there. All right, but in that, if you say, yes, I want Jesus in my life, you are going to become like Jesus. You are going to become more and more like Jesus every day. As he is multiplying in you, you are growing. You are becoming more like him. Your desires, I do think, obviously, there are some things in our life that our desires and our purposes and our plans change because of Jesus. But on the outside, it just looks like how could Jesus ever fulfill that desire in my life? How could he ever fill that plan in my life? How could he ever fill that hope or that future in my life? And the answer is he absolutely can, and better than you could ever imagine. Jesus here did something way better. They all recognized. When they looked, I'll have to jump back here. When they looked, they said, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. They recognized Jesus did something far bigger and better than anything they had ever imagined. You know, again, they were hoping to get a little piece of cracker or something just to kind of sustain them a little bit for the rest of his sermons. But what he gave them instead was this full meal. They were full. And those that really understood him spiritually were full spiritually the rest of their life. He gives better gifts than we could ever imagine. He has better plans than our plans, a better future than we could ever design for ourselves. And it comes down to the point right now that just like, you gotta believe me. There's this moment in time where you take that food and you're gonna be like, this looks strange. This is different than what I'm used to. All right, I'm touching it, so I've gotten that far. But am I gonna eat it? And there's no going back. Once you put something in your mouth, even if like you're like, oh, it's still in your mouth. All right, when you take Jesus and you say, do I really want him in my life? There's this little testing period. I know we kind of do it. You're like, all right, I'm going to try reading my Bible some. I'm going to try praying some. But it's until you say like, I'm going to be all in. I'm going to say to God, whatever you want me to do, whatever you want me to go, I'm yours. I'm yours. It's scary. It's scary. It's scarier than eating some weird dessert in Haiti, I promise. All right? It's scary, and I'm telling you, it's worth it. I'm telling you, it's going to be better than you could have ever anticipated. Not because there's going to be some kind of promise of all kinds of earthly blessings. I'm just telling you, this world's going to make a lot more sense when Jesus is your reason for living. I'm going to tell you the problems, the difficulties are just put in perspective. All right? They make way more sense in light of eternity. Worship team, if you could come on up. I think our prayer always needs to be, Jesus, if you've given me nothing, you pick. I thought the last song was great, so we can do the second to last one or the last one, 3 or 4. I think when we start looking at our life and we start shifting it just from, what do I want from Jesus in this life? What do I want from him? And instead start saying, God, what do you want from me? God, what do you want from me? You've given me everything I need. All right, he shows that he takes care of us physically. He showed his compassion to the people that were there. He could have just said, listen, it's one day, you're not going to die. But no, he says, I had compassion on them, wanted to feed them. All right, he is compassionate. He does love you. He does care for you. He does want to take care of your physical needs. But in that taking care of your physical needs, it is meant to display to you and show you that you can trust him with your spiritual needs. You can trust him with the entirety of your life. It is meant to just display. He shows, he reveals himself to us through physical needs that he meets, in order to then reveal, like, now believe me when I say to you that I can fulfill the rest. All right, we see the iceberg, and he says, you see it, believe me when I tell you. All right, there's something way bigger underneath. You're going to crash into this. All right, that's what he's asking us to do. If you've ever seen God answer a prayer in your life, if you've ever seen God answer a prayer that you prayed for something and you saw him, like, wow, he really answered my prayer there. Beautiful, awesome. He does it, he'll continue to do it. There'll continually be things in your life that you see that. But that is just the reminder to say, all right, now I need to trust you in everything. Now I need to trust you with the entirety of my soul. Let's pray.